Hello, welcome back to my channel if you've seen any of my other videos. My name is Bryn. I make videos about being trans and non-binary. Today I wanted to make a video about what it was like to grow up as a Christian, as an LGBT person, because I don't struggle with it very much anymore, but there was a lot of internalized stuff that I went through that was very hard to process, and I didn't necessarily feel like I knew people who were going through the same thing as me, and I'm really glad I made it through, but it would have been really helpful to be able to see somebody else who had struggled with the same thing and was able to make it through. So a little bit of background information if you have not seen my videos before. As I said, I'm trans and non-binary. I was assigned male at birth and raised as a boy. And when I was 13, I sort of came out as bisexual. And when I was 14, I officially came out as bisexual. And within probably about a year, I started using the term gay instead because I didn't have any attraction to women at that point in my life. And so a lot of this is going to be more revolved around being gay and being raised a Christian, but I'm also going to talk about coming out as trans and non-binary later in life and everything that goes along with that. So, as I said, I was assigned male at birth and raised as a boy. So I was raised by my mother, and she's very religious. And I have an older brother and a younger sister. And we're all roughly the same age. My brother's about a year older than me. My sister's about 2 years younger than me. And my mother's very, very religious, still. And honestly, I could really go through a lot of what went down. There were a lot of issues in our family because of my mother being so religious, but today I just want to talk about the trans stuff and gay and whatever. So, I was like a mama's boy, I guess. I was her favorite kid. She literally told me that. I know you're not supposed to tell your kids that as a mother, but like I was her favorite and she told me. And she said not to tell, and then of course I told. And and she was like my best friend basically. And we just had like that really close relationship. In a Christian setting, especially the more strict Christian rules, gender is a very like important thing. I mean, it's something that is obviously kind of implemented into almost everything that we do. It's implemented into the clothing we buy, into the jobs we're supposed to have, into the relationships we're supposed to be in. You know, it really, a lot of things revolve around gender, but especially in the Christian community, the rules of what it means to be a man or a woman are a little more strict, I think, than maybe the average world. And my mom didn't really care that I wasn't super masculine or whatever, or stereotypically masculine. I was very creative as a kid. I'm still very creative. I really liked to draw. I used to draw all these characters and they were always women. I didn't really care for boy characters. I had stuffed animals, stuff like that. And for the most part, she didn't mind it, but when she started realizing that those things could be connected to femininity rather than just non-typical maleness, that was where the problem lied. When I was probably like 10 or 11, she took all but 2 of my stuffed animals, which I had so many of them, because like they were like my comfort, and she threw them all away and didn't tell me, and I was looking for them and I asked her where they were and she told me she threw them away because boys aren't supposed to play with stuffed animals. And I mean, that kind of broke my heart, you know, because I was like, but why? Like it was like every time she would tell me or somebody would tell me like, you're not supposed to do this, it was always like, why? And there was no answer. It was just, you're just not supposed to. When I was younger, I really liked Barbie dolls, and when I would visit my Nana, she would always buy each of us kids a toy from like Target or wherever the heck we went. And I would always pick out a Barbie, and eventually my mom told her to stop. But my mom didn't tell me. So my Nana, who's like the nicest person ever, I like picked out my little Barbie doll that I wanted to have. And she was like, you can't get that. And I was like, why? And she's like, your mom told me that you're not allowed to get it. And I was like, what? And I was like, it wasn't even just like, what? Like, it was really kind of devastating as a little kid to like, you know, see something that you really love and then be told that you're like a bad person or you're wrong for liking those things when there's really no actual reason and no one's giving you an answer. You know, you're asking why is this not okay? Why aren't you letting me do this? And it's just, there's no answer. It just is really confusing, and especially for a kid who, you know, I mean, it was hurtful. And as I got older, as I mentioned in the beginning, I started realizing I liked guys. I knew that I liked other boys when I was in kindergarten. I remember I 2 boys specifically that I liked, and I remember liking them, and I didn't think too much of it, but the older I got, especially once puberty started to hit and like the hormones were coming in, all that kind of stuff, like I realized I really liked guys, and I didn't feel that way about girls at all. I liked girls. I liked to hang out with girls. Girls were my best friends. Girls were so pretty. I loved their hair. I loved everything about girls, but I didn't feel that way about other girls. I just felt that way about other guys. And it was rough because the older I got, especially with puberty hitting, it hit me that I was really different and that I was also very alone in that experience because I didn't know other gay people. I thought gay was like a dirty word, you know, like even saying it felt dirty, like, or gross or shameful. Shameful is like probably the best way to explain it. I felt very, very ashamed, but it was like something I couldn't turn off. And I was basically told that I was choosing to be this way, which was so confusing because I was like, I don't feel that way. Like, I don't feel like I'm choosing this. I feel like this is just how it's been since I can remember. And so I felt like I was being made out to be this like demonic, pleasure-seeking, evil, whatever. And truthfully, I was just like a 12-year-old kid who was experiencing feelings just like any other 12-year-old kid does. But they were just feelings for a different group of people than what was expected of me, I guess. Before I go any further, I want to say if you're watching this and you were not raised as a Christian or in some sort of religious household or whatever, it might be a little bit difficult to completely understand, which is fine. But all the things that I'm saying that like these people are telling me about who I am, they weren't just like words that they said and I was like, well, that's dumb. Everything that was said to me were words that I internalized and words that I shaped my identity around, essentially, unintentionally, but it was greatly affecting me. To have your mother, the person who, like I said, she was like my best friend, the person you love most in the world, to tell you these things, is a really difficult thing to hear. And with the way that our relationship was, I had no reason not to believe her. I had no reason to think, well, she's wrong, because she knew me better than anyone in my life, and she loved me more than anyone in my life. And so for her to be saying these things, the idea of her being wrong wasn't even a possibility in my head. And, you know, now if somebody said any of the stuff that was told to me when I was that age, I'd be like, whatever, like, they don't pay them any mind. But like at you know, at that age, I took everything so personally, and I had a really negative self-view of myself, and it wasn't something that I let go of easily, and I'll get into that, but I internalized all these things. I officially came out when I was 14. If you haven't seen any of my other videos, I've mentioned it in a few of them, but when I was 14, I ended up like making out with a guy in front of my entire high school, so everyone found out that I liked guys. And I still felt shameful or ashamed or whatever, but by that point I had basically accepted that I was gay and it's not gonna go away. And obviously the guy that I kissed in front of everybody was gay, and I had other gay friends, which was a first for me. I didn't know other people who were gay, and when I went to high school, there were 2 middle schools that when you go to high school, you go to the same high school, and a lot of the people from the other middle school were gay, and so when you went to high school, I met them, and I was like, okay, yeah, same. And I accepted that I was gay, but I didn't like it. But I surrounded myself with people who loved me anyways, basically, because I had been fighting it for a long time. I really started noticing probably when I was like 10 or 11 is when it really started like kicking in gear, or like when I really started actually thinking about it. And by this point I was 14, and I was just so over fighting it and feeling guilty and feeling bad and feeling worthless and all this stuff. And so I just decided, okay, I'm gay, and like even if I go to hell, I'm gonna go to hell whether or not I accept it and live my life, or if I fight against it forever. I'm tired of fighting against it. So but like I said, I still felt guilty, and I still felt like I was horribly wrong. But I essentially, I guess, gave up on the notion that I could ever be anything different, because it wasn't ever going to go away. And it took me, I want to say, until I graduated high school, maybe probably 17 or 18 years old, before I really actually felt okay with being gay. But by that point I had figured out that I was not a boy. So even though I was like finally like, it's okay to be gay, I realized I was trans, and then that came with a whole slew of issues. And for the record, I actively pursued a gay lifestyle, or whatever you want to call it. And for the most part, like, you know, over time it got easier and easier. But I would still have these moments where I would panic. I would panic really bad because of all this internalized stuff, and the friends that I had that were gay didn't necessarily understand all the internalized stuff that I had from being raised as a Christian, and a lot of people who were raised as a Christian didn't understand the gay thing, and sometimes I had people who understood both partially. Like, I had friends who I went to church with who were totally fine with me being gay, but they themselves didn't really identify as a Christian and identify with all that kind of stuff. It was just kind of like they went to church. Whereas, like, for me, like, my identity for a very long time was I am a Christian, because that was what I was taught. That was what was good. That was what was valuable. Like, if you're not that, what are you? And so to go from identifying with that and dealing with being gay, and the two just didn't mix at all. And I essentially had to choose, and I was like, you know what? I can't choose being gay. Like, I can't change that, but I can change my views. And I started working through things logically instead of from a fear-based perspective, which I think helped a lot. But it wasn't super easy. I'm going to backtrack a little bit, I think, but the idea of doubting God or doubting the rules that you've been taught are from God in a very religious setting aren't just frowned upon. I mean, they are frowned upon, but to even branch out of that was so difficult, because when you're told from the time that you can remember talking that your life's purpose is to follow God or Jesus and do whatever the heck he put you on this earth to do, and then you're taught that being gay is a complete slap in the face to what you're supposed to do here on earth, and that anything, essentially, that questioning any part of God or doubting any part of God or Jesus or whatever it's not just like, oh, it's a sin, like when you accidentally yell at somebody because you're mad, or when you like steal like a candy bar from Walmart. Like, this is like your entire identity is disposable if you step outside of line of what God wants you to be. And if you question it, that is the devil talking to you. That is the devil taking over. And I was essentially programmed for most of my childhood to believe that I almost, not that I didn't have control over my actions or whatever, but that I didn't have the power to be in charge of my life. That I was either choosing to follow God or I was choosing to follow the devil. But I was never choosing to follow me. And that choosing me was the same as choosing the devil, essentially. And I'm sure if you weren't raised Christian, this might sound very silly. But this is I'm looking at this now and I'm like, this is what I was taught. But growing up, that was what I believed at my core. And that's not an easy thing to let go of. When your entire identity is wrapped around being a good Christian, and then you come to realize that you don't fit that definition, and you have to suddenly question everything you've ever been taught. I still don't know actually how I did it. Like, I look back and I'm like, I guess decided to do it. But I mean, that's a lifelong process for some people. There's people who never get out of that. There's people who, like, even my mother, like, she has never stepped out of her comfort zone, essentially, because the feeling of panic and anxious, she's convinced is the devil, instead of just a natural reaction that you have when you're stepping out of your comfort zone. And that was something that I experienced years ago and learned to work through. And I don't know how I did it. I don't know how I learned, but I figured it out. And if you're stuck in that same situation, you can make it through. Just like as a reminder for anyone watching this who needs to hear that. And it's not going to happen overnight. And I would recommend maybe getting a therapist. It's really hard to unlearn the things that you learned, because my entire worldview was revolved around God. So to have to change my entire worldview, it's like I was dying and being reborn almost. And like, it was like every time I figured out something new, I was dying again, almost like spiritually dying or something. And that's a really like intense process to go through. But to flash forward a little bit, I started questioning my gender when I was 17. I was a senior in high school. And at that point, I didn't know about non-binary, so I was like, okay, I'm a trans woman. And that came with its own slew of problems. I officially came out as a trans woman when I was 18, but I did not start hormones until I was almost 20. It was about, I think, a year and 9 months after I came out, I finally started hormones. And part of that was because I knew that I wasn't a woman, but I didn't know about being non-binary. And I was afraid if I, like, it's a very permanent thing, not in every area, but to start taking hormones, there are some permanent, long-lasting effects. And to reverse them, you'd have to have surgery or whatever. And so it was, I have a problem with commitment, which I could make a whole video about, but this is not the video. But two, I was really struggling with my gender identity. And a lot of that revolved around being raised as a Christian, because I had a family member who also transitioned. I wasn't very close with her, but she transitioned when I was a kid, and the lashback from my family was not very good, obviously. And it was always said, like, the tone with everything that everybody said, it was essentially that, oh, he's gonna come back one day and be a man, and this is just a phase, like, this is just, you know, whatever. This is the devil working, blah, 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 blah. And that never ended up happening. And she ended up having SRS, which in my family's eyes essentially made it so she could never be a man again, even if she decided she wanted to be, which she won't. But I saw the way that she was treated, and it was really, really bad. And she lost her entire family because of it. And all I kept hearing was, he's gonna come back, he's gonna come back. I put that in quotes because she's not a fucking man. She's a trans woman, so... But, of course, they were misgendering her, as per usual. And I internalized everything that they said about her. And when I was figuring out my gender, it took up until a few years ago that I was 100% sure of my gender identity. And because in my head, when I first started questioning my gender, there was male and there was female. There was no non-binary, there was no in-between, there was no blah, blah, blah. It was all very, like, polarized. Masculine, male, feminine, female. I had to pick one or the other. So I went from being a male to being a female, and I hated it. I hated being feminine. I did not feel good at all. But I also knew that I wasn't a man. And it was very confusing because everything, it always rung in my ear. Oh, well, you know, my family member, well, she is really a man and is gonna come back and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, I'm not even confident in being a woman. What if my family is right? What if I'm just lying to myself? What if this isn't real, blah, 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 blah? What if I'm really just a man? And it was really confusing because I didn't even understand that I was non-binary, and that's where my doubt of being a woman was coming from. But I thought it was because the woman part of me was the devil, and the non-woman part of me was God, essentially, from what I was taught at a young age growing up. And it was really... I felt really, really alone. I felt really depressed. I felt really alone. I felt like I couldn't talk to anybody. Everyone who was supporting me in my transition didn't understand the Christian thing. Or I felt like they didn't anyways. Maybe some of them did, but I didn't feel like they did. And then the people who understood the Christian thing, I didn't get along with any of them because they were all horrible to me. And it was like, if I would express any sort of doubt, they would just use that as a reason to tell me why I'm wrong, instead of actually listening to how I was feeling. So I felt really lost, and it wasn't until I discovered non-binary people and what that really meant, that I started realizing, okay, that's who I am, and I'm really confident in that, and I know that I'm not a man. But the lack of knowing about non-binary people and being raised as a Christian really tugged on my identity and my self-worth, my self-esteem, all that kind of stuff. And just not a fun time. Would not recommend. But I think that's basically all of it. But again, I know I said this in the middle of the video, I guess, but if you are like struggling with that kind of stuff, I'm trying to think of like the words to say. If you are struggling with that kind of stuff, it is okay to be struggling, and just because you're not confident in who you are doesn't mean that you're not who you are, if that makes sense. It can take time to feel like yourself. And what I would say is, I guess, take it one step at a time. I think I got really focused on the end product, and I was like, I don't know who I want to be. I don't know who I want to be. But when I started kind of looking at like, well, who am I now? Like right now. And like, I think that helped. And I don't know. I think it's an important thing for me to share, because like I said, I felt really alone throughout this entire process in terms of overcoming this Christianity trauma, or whatever you want to call it, internalized stuff from being raised a Christian. And I really wish that I would have had somebody to talk to, or somebody who went through it. And I don't know, and I didn't, my family member, I know, like, probably you're watching this, why didn't you reach out to your family member? And it was because I was doubting myself, and I was worried that if I told her I was doubting myself, she would be like, well, then you're not really trans. Because she and I never talked about the whole trans thing or anything like that. It was just, it happened, and that's what it was. And I was worried about getting rejected, essentially. So I never reached out to her. But I am here to tell you that you can figure it out, and you will. And it might take time. And you know what? And it is possible. You can be a Christian and be trans. I'm not saying that, like, denying Christianity is for everybody. I think it depends on your viewpoints. It depends on what you perceive Christianity to be and all that kind of stuff. But I just wanted to share, because I feel like it's something that I wish I would have seen somewhere. Like, if I would have watched this video when I was like 19, I probably would have like sobbed. like I really wish I had this when I was going through it all. So yeah, but I hope you all have a wonderful day. I'm gonna head on out, so thanks for listening.